Welcome to our Panchkura Bonamari College. Welcome to you all to our Teachers Training Department. It is a proud privilege and great honor for us that we have amongst us famous novelist, poet of Sri Lanka, Dr. Shubhadeep Paul, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Bankura University. We have with us Dr. Joydeep Sarangi, veteran academic, poet, translator, and principal of New Alipur College, Kolkata. We have with us Dr. Shruti Das, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of English, Berhampur University, to deliver their valuable lectures on impact of COVID-19 on society, literature, and environment. To our two-day international webinar organized by Teachers Training Department in collaboration with IQAC Panchkura Bonamari College. So today we are going to start our program with due permission from our principal sir and IQAC coordinator Dr. Nirmalo sir. Sir, may you begin our program?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, let's start our program with Sanskrit sloks from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So I am inaugurating this program with the sloks from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Om Narayanam Namaskritya Naran Chaiva Narottama Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayo Mudiray Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pungum Langhate Girim Yati Kripa Tamahang Vande Paramananda Madhavam Srimad Bhagavad Gita Sarvopnisado Gabo Dogdha Gopalanandanaha Parthavatsa Sudhir Bhukta Dogdham Gita Mritang Mahat Vosudeva Sutang Devam Kamso Chanuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Yagatmurum Sarvadharman Porityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tvam Sarva Papekho Moksha Isami Yagacharam Sarvadharman Porityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tvam Sarva Papekho Moksha Isami Yagacharam. With this Sanskrit slok, I started my program. So now I'm requesting our Honorable Principal Sir, Professor Dr. Nandan Bhattacharya, to deliver the inaugural speech. Please, sir, just inaugurate our program.
Good morning to all you all. This is a wonderful opportunity to meet together and to see you all again. And this is an ongoing web series, web seminar, different departments. I like to thank our technical team to help us to organize such seminars. And this is one of the hot topic you are organizing, Subhashis and his company, and which is the impact of COVID-19 on society, literature, and environment. And this is a wonderful topic. I must say that this is really cream of all the webinars we are organizing. Now, we all know that towards the end of 2019, started in Wuhan, the capital of Hubei province in China, with an exceptionally high number of pneumonia cases. That time it was told that it was pneumonia cases of unusual characteristics. Is a novel infection called corona disease. The causative agent of this outbreak was identified as beta coronavirus with a genomic sequence closely related to that of severe acute respiratory syndrome. We all know as SARS virus. And adding now the thing is this 2019 disease, also we call it COVID-19, has quickly transformed from a regional outbreak in China into a complete global pandemic, resulting in almost 10 million cases worldwide within the first 5 months. And the large scale outbreak has spread to more than 216 countries, regions, territories across the world, yielding more than 10 million infected cases and almost more than 6 lakhs deaths globally uh, till now. Now, the biggest question we should ask related to this environmental impact of the crisis, that could the crisis following the COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak actually be good for the environment and the society? Because everything cannot be negative. The biggest question started like this: impact on waste generation and handling, because we know that large number of medical wastes are being produced every day throughout the world, and the waste industry in India particularly, even pre-COVID-19 pandemic, had limited capacity and service provisions, which is now being hit the hardest in the following ways. Now, waste collectors are now handling potential infected waste, and lack of safety and personal protection gears, increasing their exposure to COVID-19 virus. Although we are now dealing with those things uh, successfully. Now, effect of COVID-19 restrictions on environment, because we all know that there was a Janata curfew first, and then lockdown, and then partial lockdown, then unlockdown. And now, what would be the effect of COVID-19 restriction on environment? Effect of ambient air quality at urban and regional scale, because we all know that the pollution level of the air quality level was good when there was total lockdown. Impact of surface water quality, that should be addressed. Effect on indoor quality, air quality. Impact on noise pollution. And thirdly and lastly, the literature, because when I went through PubMed, I found that more than 46,000 uh, articles scientific articles were published uh, till today, and this is a good news that during this pandemic situation, most of the journals, almost all the journals, they are publishing as open mode these papers in open mode. That means everybody can see and read those papers. So this is a very good topic to be discussed. I appreciate Dayat Dishnayake, who is coming all the way from Singhal, and he's a noted poet, novelist of Sri Lanka, and he also is the winner of SARC Literary Award. And I also like to thank Dr. Shubhadeep Pal, who is Assistant Professor, Department of English, Bankura University, Bankura, West Bengal. I think these two speakers are going to deliver their valuable knowledge, uh, which is going to be delivered today. And tomorrow, Dr. Joydeep Sarangi, one of the principal, who is the principal of New Alipur College, Kolkata. He will be delivering lecture tomorrow. And also Dr. Shruti Das from Birampur University, Odisha, head of the Department of English. He is going to deliver his hard, valuable lecture tomorrow. So I wish this um, webinar series a great success. I hope that Department of Education, uh, B.Ed
বিছানাটা তুল
department will organize more, uh, because we all know that during this period we are organizing almost more than 12 web series and webinars within the last couple of days. So we wish all of them all the success, and thanks to the team of B.Ed department, particularly Tuhin Singho and Tuhin Kaur. I also like to thank our member secretary, Tuhin Kaur, and controller of exam is here, right? Controller of exam is here. Um, if he is here, thanks to him too. Uh, and that's it. Good luck to you all, and good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening and informative speech. And we are really elevated and boosted by your lecture. Now, I'm inviting our IQC sir, Dr. Nirmallo sir, to say a few words regarding this webinar. Sir, please say some words.
Uh, thank you, Sivasis. It is my pleasure to welcome you all, especially our eminent poet, novelist, Daya Disanayake from Sri Lanka, Dr. Shubhadeep Pal from Bankura University Department of English, and all the participants and the organizing members of B.Ed department and technical support from our teaching staff by Dr. Raju Singh, Mr. Tuhin Singh. We welcome all because during this pandemic situation, it is very problem to us to organize the seminar directly. So webinar is one of the important way to communicate all the system, all the people, communicate the knowledge between. I welcome Dishanayake because as we see him as an eminent person because in 2013 he won the SARC award, literary award, and I have gone through his profile because in last 2 days back, one seminar organized by Sanskrit University that regarding this pandemic, and they discussed about the literary item that was mainly in Indian literature, in Sanskrit, in Puranas, how they protect or themselves during this period, and they discussed very in a very fine way that in from mythological period to historical to present days, how literary form and literature, the different published literature, how they have discussed in regarding this pandemic situation. So it is our privilege that uh, Daya Disanayake from Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka is our one of the most important neighboring country, and India and Sri Lanka has a close relation from this mythological to historical, from Ramayana to Ashok to present day. So this is a great opportunity for us to share knowledge with Dishanayake, and also from the Professor Dr. Shubhodip Pal of Bankura University, Department of English, an eminent uh, person of English literature. We are eagerly waiting for their valuable knowledge, for their discussion. And on behalf of Pashpura Monomali College, IQAC, I again welcome you all to this seminar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Nirmallo sir, for your inspiring speech, and you always boost us by your good thoughts and innovative ideas. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now it is the time we are waiting, and now I'm inviting Daya Disinayak, famous poet, author, novelist, and a great blogger from Sri Lanka. Before that, let us have a glance about Daya Desinayak. Daya Desinayak is an award-winning bilingual Sri Lankan novelist, poet, blogger. He won the Sark Literary Award in 2013. His work spans 11 novels in English, 6 novels in Sinhala, and collection of poems and numerous articles in newspapers, journals, and magazines. He is the only Sri Lankan to have won State Literary Award for English novel thrice. He shared the Swarna Pustak Award for the best Sinhala novel in 2007 for Chandru Ratnage Bhavantara Charikave. He published the first e-novel in English from Asia and also the first Sinhala e-novel. He completed a critical study on Emperor Ashoka. He presented 35 papers at international conferences on themes of history, religion, environment, and literature over the last 6 years. He is the country coordinator International Conference on Buddhist Archaeology in China and South Asia. He is the former coordinator in Sri Lanka for the Foundation of Sark Writers and Literature Festival. So now I'm inviting Daya Disinayak for your illuminating and enlightening lecture, for which we are waiting and waiting. Sir, please start your lecture.
Okay. Namaskar. And my title for today is A World in Panic Mode, a Need of Humility in Our Literature. So I must thank the organizers, Professor Sibasis Jana and his team, for the opportunity to voice my rambling thoughts at this webinar. I am happy that webinars have been accepted today, though I had been trying to encourage it for the last 10 years. About the pandemic we are faced today, the world went into total panic mode a few months ago because of the new virus infection that started in China. Who really cried wolf? Who pressed the panic button? Was it the World Health Organization, the mass media, the social media, or various political forces, each with their own motives? Covid-19, or the virus strain SARS-CoV-2, should never have caused such a pandemic or affected the world the way it did. It was blind panic on one side and gross carelessness on the other hand, which created the situation from which we have not been able to come out. There will be many studies, research projects around the world, not only on the origin of SARS-CoV-2, but how it spread in China and then jumped to Italy and South Korea, and then all over the world. We are counting the infected persons, the numbers who recovered, who died. It's like a scorecard of an international sports event. posted by the second, or minute, or daily. What we do not count is the number who died from other illnesses or accidents because of the lockdowns and lack of public transport. We have no figures of those who lost their jobs, who lost their business, who were stranded as refugees, unable to return to their homes. We do not count the pain and suffering of starving children. The panic initiated urgent research for diagnostic test kits, drugs for treatment, prophylactics for prevention, and for a vaccine against the virus. Out of about 100 projects which began, there are over 25 separate research projects racing to produce the first vaccine against this virus. Already Russia claims to have produced a vaccine, but the multinational drug mafia will be giving priority to patent their brands because their target is the multi-billion-dollar profits. The estimated $100 billion revenue and the $40 billion profits from the vaccine explains where priorities are decided. It is obvious that the WHO really panicked because as at 29 July 2020, just 6 months from the date of the first news from Wuhan, which was about a few cases of viral pneumonia, unknown cases, WHO had held 83 media briefings during the 6 months, which just show how panicked they were, which would have given full encouragement to the mass media to blow the epidemic totally out of proportion to what it turned out to be. To go back into the history of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it was on 31st December 2019 that the WHO country office in China picked up a media statement by the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission on viral pneumonia cases, and also a cluster of cases of pneumonia of unknown causes. On 9 January, WHO announced that China reported it as a novel coronavirus. And on the 11th, they faced the first death from this novel coronavirus. 28 January, the pandemic supply chain network met for the first time on this issue, and WHO published advice on the use of masks in the community during home care and in healthcare settings. By 30th January, there were 98 cases in 18 countries outside China, including 8 cases of human-to-human transmission in 4 countries: Germany, Japan, Vietnam, and the United States. Till then, it's till the 30th January, no deaths had been reported outside China. But WHO declared the PHEIC, that is Public Health Emergency of International Concern, on 30th January, which they had denied a week ago. And we call it an epidemic or a pandemic. An epidemic is an outbreak of a disease that spreads quickly and affects many people at the same time. An outbreak occurs when there is a sudden increase in the number of cases of a disease like the Covid-19. An epidemic becomes a pandemic when it spreads over significant geographical areas and affects a large percentage of the population. Examples of past pandemics are the flu pandemic of 1968, the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and the bubonic plague. Going back into history, in Sri Lanka, there is a record in a Sinhala work, Pujavaliya, which was written in the 13th century, which describes an epidemic called Raktakshi Maraka Javara Rogya, which had happened about 1800 years ago. The king at the time, King Sri Sangabodhi, had performed Satyakriya and was able to drive away the Yaksha who caused it. Later on, Professor Kumaradasa Jayasurya had considered this could have been leptospirosis. Whatever it was, We had faced a serious epidemic and had been able to eradicate it without the aid of all the modern biotechnology, diagnosis methods, vaccines, and drugs. But recently it has come back, and there is no vaccine and no treatment for it. COVID-19 also has given a new concept to social distancing. Even though the term was not used much, it always had meant the social distance kept by the elite, the haves, the wealthy, and the powerful, to ensure the have-nots, the poor, and the powerless kept their distance. It would have been the status, profession, class, or the caste which ensured social distance then. It could have been the status or the caste then. But SARS-CoV-2 broke through all the barriers to make all human beings keep their distance from each other. But did we all keep social distance in public? Did we take care to not to spread the disease? How many of us really thought of the other people around us, our neighbors, our neighboring countries? Are we concerned only about our safety and that of our family? If we had been really concerned, then who has been discarding their used face masks and the empty sanitizer bottles all over the place, in garbage dumps, drains, and often by the roadside? There was another practice that was insisted upon by the health authorities, which was to wash our hands all the time, to keep our hands clean. We needed that. We really need that. If we can all keep our hands clean, there would be no corruption, no violence, and we would not even need any governance. But to escape COVID-19, did the hand washing really help? Only about 25% of the people in South Asia have pipe-borne clean water. The other 75% are the people who cannot afford to use even hand sanitizers or other precautionary methods. It could be that they were protected by the gods, by nature, or by the immunity they had against most common infections. Then we had another panic, food shortages. Once again, it was a panic created by us, by the media, and by the governments. We are responsible for the food shortages during the panic. Agriculture, or what has come to be agribusiness, is responsible for food shortages and unequal distribution around the world, and also the most infectious and non-infectious diseases. It is what we eat, which made us so susceptible to the coronavirus. Today, our diet is decided by the traders. They tell the farmers what they should cultivate. Then the consumer has no option but to eat the few vegetables and fruits that the trader brings to the market. In ancient times, we had such a great choice of vegetable matter and fruits, and which also gave us all our vitamins and all the minerals that were required, which built up our immunity and kept us safe from all the diseases. Today, what has happened is the farmers had all the available agri-poisons to the vegetables, and we consume the poisons, resulting in cancer, kidney failure, and numerous other killer diseases, which are more harmful than the COVID-19 virus. These new diseases also cause most of the deaths among those who had got infected with the COVID-19 virus. It's not the healthy people who die, but the people who had been affected by other diseases. But again, the question comes, why do we grow so much food? Why do we have to eat so much food? Animals living in the wild eat only when they are hungry. We eat out of habit, out of greed, and just because the food is there. Even during the past few months, most of us did not cut down on our food, even knowing that there would be many people going hungry, either because they could not purchase and stock up large amounts of food, even if they had the money, or others who did not have the money to buy, and others who would not know when they would earn a few rupees next. We did not think about such unfortunate people, even when we heaped a lot of food on our plate and left most of it uneaten. And with the corona epidemic, there were those who tried to trace its origin, some of them blaming the laboratories, saying it's a biological weapon, but others who blamed it on eating of wild animals and bats. All animals should have been wild at first. A bat also could have been seen as a bird. Habits and food liking vary from country to country. While we eat chicken, in some countries they eat roast, and in others bats. Some eat deer and goats, while others eat dogs and cats. It's unfortunate that people began to kill and eat animals. But today we buy our meat in supermarkets, which are hygienically packed, and we look down on people who purchase wet meat or live animals and do their own killing and skinning. But how sure are we that it was the live animals that were sold in China that spread the virus? Because they would have been eating such animals for several thousand years. And all these years, there was no such virus infection and no such epidemic. But what if the next virus is to come through a fish, a chicken, or a goat, or the milk of a cow? Will the vegans blame the next epidemic on the carnivores? We are concerned today about the COVID-19 patients struggling to breathe, because most of the patients who didn't recover, they probably died because they couldn't breathe. But we let the fish die of suffocation so we can enjoy its flesh on the table. For a very long time, we have not been thinking about the people in other countries, other states, other cities, and even in our own city or neighborhood. Had we been worried or concerned, we would have been able to eradicate malaria, dengue, Japanese encephalitis, and filaria long ago. Had we been concerned about other people, HIV and AIDS would have disappeared. This would be the same the world over. A report from the Yale School of Medicine had this to say about the COVID pandemic. The close to 1 billion people that are estimated to live in urban slums or informal settlements are highly susceptible to COVID-19 infection, since basic needs such as water, toilets, sewers, drains, and secure and adequate housing are already in short supply or non-existent. Further, space constraints, violence, and overcrowding in slums and tenements makes physical distancing and self-quarantine impractical, and the rapid spread of an infection highly likely. Pre-existing comorbidities likely increase COVID-19 vulnerability. Residents of informal settlements are also economically vulnerable during any COVID-19 responses, since most urban poor living in slums are informal workers, meaning they must show up to earn daily wages, and this daily income is used for subsistence. Any response to COVID-19 that do not recognize these realities will further jeopardize the survival of large segments of the urban population globally. They also continued in the report, an equitable approach to arresting the COVID-19 pandemic must change standard ways of treating the urban poor, create more participatory governance, improve the digital services, including healthcare, and invest new resources to ensure urban informal settlements benefit in the long term. Racism, xenophobia, and stigma against the poor, migrants, and lower classes has also increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. Is the cause of most ill health could have been eradicated if we had all tried. Mahatma Gandhi's Daridra Narayan failed because we did not understand his vision and we were not ready to share his concern. While we mourn with the loved ones, sometimes their homes, let us also look at what we have learned or what we should learn from the pandemic. Let me begin with a poem which I wrote a few months ago and some of you have already heard. I titled it SARS-CoV-2, the name of our virus. Why are you blaming me for your pandemic? I too have a right to life. I did not jump or fly from one body to another. I was happy to live my short life in one place. You passed me on to your family, then your neighbors. You did not stop with that. You wanted to share me with your own kind, in your city, your district, across the borders, across the seas. Why are you blaming me after taking me all over the world? Why are you blaming me because you have become weak, lost your immunity, ignored health warnings, though thought only about yourself? Why are you blaming me for your death wish to commit mass suicide, wealth, and power? I too have a right to life, to live where I like, same as you. We need to learn to be humble. We have to realize and accept that we too are just parasites living on the skin of Mother Earth. All other living beings on Earth, which include not just elephants and whales, ants and spreads, but also bacteria and viruses, have an equal right to life. We are all one family, living in one close, stable ecosystem. We have no right to disturb this equilibrium. We have to be humble in our thinking, our writing and reading the literature written by other fellow writers, whatever their race, ethnicity, religion, caste, or gender. COVID-19 showed us that we writers too are equal as far as virus was concerned. Whether we have won the Nobel or the Booker or the Jnanpith or the humble unknown self-published author or even a writer who had not been able to find a publisher. All writers were equal before this virus. We need not be really proud about our awards. I believe all the literary awards I received would have been accidental because myself or my books were there in the right place at the right time. If it had been published the year before or year after, I may not have got the award, or if the judges had been different. As I grow older and a little wiser, I realize there is nothing for me to be proud of about my awards or my books, especially when I realized there could be many great writers in our country, in South Asia, and around the world who have not been able to publish their works or to be able to write in an international language. I also believe the unknown, humble writer is better able to contribute to the well-being of all life on earth, to give the opportunity for readers to become more empathetic because they are closer to the people and understand them better. I use the term literate chauvinism, which makes us feel so superior to a farmer in a remote village who has to place his thumbprint because he does not know how to sign his name. We feel superior to a child who had his education in a village school or even a Mahavidyalaya. We are superior to a person with just a high school education or only a bachelor's degree. Superior to a person who had not read Kafka and Sartre and Plato, while others show their superiority by dropping names like Marquez, Allende, and Murakami. Like the male chauvinist who lives in a dream world believing he is superior to women, all forms of chauvinistic behavior is a delusion created by man's own ego. Literacy is really nothing to be proud of. The prehistoric man who did his symbolic paintings in his caves were able to express with a few lines what would take 1,000 words for us to convey now. But still we think of them as primitive, as barbarian, as subhuman, even though they would have been more intelligent, more capable, and would have had superior memory capacity. They did not have digital storage devices or cloud storage facilities or backups. But they had to keep everything in their own brains, in their own minds, and be able to pass on to the next generation. What we call illiteracy was the firewall used by the literate chauvinists to protect their knowledge. But their literacy did not protect them from the pandemic, or they did not have the confidence of immunity. Even among the literate, since ancient times, a hyperliterate group emerged, mainly among the elite and the religious institutions, and they used the most elaborate language possible in the religious writings and even in literary works to keep them out of reach of less literate. Chauvinism takes many forms among mankind. Some of us feel superior because we have mastered the white man's language, and anyone who does not speak English is a semi-literate. In multilingual countries, those who believe their language is superior to that of others would look down on the other languages used in their country. We still talk about, teach, and learn world literature, ignoring our own Vishwasahitya. It's a time for us to search for writings of yet unknown writers in South Asia, writing in their mother tongue, whose creative works could be far superior to what we consider today as world literature. We need to show loving kindness. It means we have to be totally unselfish. Before we use a single drop of water, before we discharge a single molecule of contamination into the water and earth, we need to think of the 1 billion who do not have access to clean water, or the 4,000 children who die every day due to contaminated water. Before we eat a single morsel of food, let us think of the 1 billion human beings who are starving. Yet we overeat or throw away more than enough food to feed all these people, children, women, and men. I see a vast difference between compassionate consumption and the vulgar consumption we see around us. We should try not to promote such vulgar consumption through our literature. Unconsciously or consciously, we writers have become victims of the business mafia by giving into embedded marketing to promote unwanted, unnecessary, often obscene acquisitions of luxuries, exorbitantly priced food and drink. I believe it is time for us to write about simple people living happily with what they have or what they could achieve, but who would want to guide their children to be better citizens who would make a greater contribution to the betterment of all. Though some of us abhor pornography, which is only limited to sexual pornography, more harmful and much worse would be the other forms of pornography, the pornography of violence and the pornography of uncontrolled overconsumption. Most of our historical fiction is about kings and royal families, glorifying their bloodthirsty wars and the luxuries they enjoy. In the past, the writers were motivated by the gifts and positions they enjoy in the royal courts. Today, it's for filthy lucre that they can earn. What we need is for man to become humane once again. Writers have a major role to play and a major responsibility to regain the lost humanity. If we become really human once again, then all the evil on earth would disappear, and we could live in peace and harmony with all races, creeds, castes, and people speaking in different languages. We have to become writers for humanity. Then we should be able to shed all our petty differences of nationality, race, party politics, personal interests, language or religious issues, and even regional issues. In order to achieve this, youth have a mighty weapon, the digital world, where they can use their most convenient, most handy, and most powerful weapons in the form of their computers, laptops, tablets, and smartphones. They have already begun to use these weapons. They use them successfully in other countries, in Iran and in Egypt. They use these weapons to save democracy. Now they can use it to restore humanity. For this, we have to reorganize and accept their writing medium. So they write in the clouds, they write in the electronic media, in e-books, e-journals, blogs, and social media. All of us too have to think outside the box, that it is not necessary in the world today to publish something in the print medium to be accepted as a writer, or we should hold copyright. I have tried to promote ebooks for the past 22 years because I recognize it as the future. I tried to promote webinars for over 10 years, but it took a pandemic to make the majority realize the advantages of webinars and online lectures and conferences, which can be shared with many more people than the few limited seats available in a normal conference. Schools and universities have seen the advantage of online education. There may be a few drawbacks yet, but nothing that could not be overcome. We can all be independent of the publishers and booksellers, or we can dictate our terms to them. We can also share our works with anyone, anywhere on earth. We can cross all barriers, geographical, political, economical, and social. Someday soon, with computer-aided translations, we can cross even the language barrier. We can free ourselves from the fetters of commodified literature. We can share our work in cyberspace under copyleft or Creative Commons. Today, we need not have ulterior motives to do our creative work. If we try to bring our creative writing, if we try to make a living with our creative writing, then we are abandoning Saraswati and selling our Atma to Kubera. So let me end with another poem I wrote during the lockdown, which I titled Brahma Vihar. Let us show our loving kindness towards all life on earth, compassion in our consumption to share our food with all, and have the pleasure of empathetic joy and the relief of equanimity. Let us arise once again, defying Corona, and be strong together alongside all life and nature to face any threats in the future, viral or human. So, thank you very much and namaskar. And I would like to respond to any queries from any of you now. Thank you and Dhanyabad.
Thank you, Dayadasanak sir, for your enlightening and illuminating speech. We are really spellbound by your lecture. Really wonderful. Thank you, sir. The references of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Mahatma Gandhi, and other related areas. And until and unless we are really kind-hearted and we have humility, we cannot just control our corona. So your topic on world in panic mode, need of humility in our literature. Really grateful, thankful to you for your illuminating lecture. And we can understand about that after so many years, such kind of pandemic, particularly this word, as we can say about this word, particularly COVID-19, is a dangerous word today. It's a terror to the world. And we can also say that the COVID-19 induced pandemic has ushered in an unprecedented global reorientation of the conventional functioning of the Anthropocene. The resultant lockdowns, physical distancing, slowdown of the gyration of modernity have refashioned our public engagements and private pursuits, majorly influenced by a state of quarantine. Inevitably, this has influenced the socio-cultural modalities of the human practices, reminiscence of previous mass epidemics, and compelling us to contend with the idea of new normal. This isolationism, in turn, has influenced our prototypical engagements with literature and the arts as well as the anthropocentric prioritization of the environment. Although the universal development of a vaccine or cure might conceivably remedy this crisis, so we are waiting. It remains to be considered that lasting lessons what we derived from this pandemic. We are just waiting for when the vaccine will come out. So let us just think about, let us just wait for our question answer. If we have particular observations, and we are ready for our interaction. Now it's the time for our interaction session. So the questions and observations are open for the audiences. Hello, is there any kind of question or observation related to this topic?
Professor Sibasis, I can share my draft, the paper I prepared for this. I can share it with you so that you can share it with the others. And later on, then through WhatsApp or email or whatever form, any queries, any clarifications, I would be happy to provide anytime.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your enlightening speech. But if any kind of observation from any kind of participant, Nirmala sir. Tuhin, please
Good
say
morning.
something.
Good morning. This
Good
is
morning.
Shruti Das. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Shruti madam.
Good morning.
Nice to
I
see
think there
you.
are some questions in the chat box. Why don't you take up the questions in the chat box? I found one someone who was asking whether Dayasar thinks that this pandemic has any kind of relation with the Spanish flu, and if the literature produced during this pandemic will be any different from that produced during the Spanish flu? I think Daya sir can answer this.
We can't compare something that happened about 100 years ago with what's happening today because the society has completely changed. Technology has changed. People are traveling around more, and poverty has increased in one sense, and also more affluent people are. Yeah, so things are different, and attitudes are different, and also it would not have been such a panic created by the mass media and especially the social media because we would not have had any social media during the time of the Spanish flu. And many people would have died without knowing what killed them. But today, people all over the world, even in the remotest areas, would have had some awareness of the threat and would have been able to take some precautions if they wanted to or if they cared to. And the literature, if any literature comes out, probably it will also be different. And I hope that the literature this time will look at the more humane side of the issue rather than what some people suffered or how some people were treated badly. Then not the negative side, but the positive side and what we can learn from this. Because through literature, through poetry, through short stories, through novels, we could convey more to the people than through lectures and lessons and through the government media. So that is a responsibility that we have as writers.
Pardon me, sir. Sir, pardon me. May I put a question, sir? Pardon me. Sorry for my introduction. Sorry for my intervention, sir.
No,
May
no,
I put a
please
question?
go ahead. Please go ahead and put questions. Please go ahead.
Madam, is it Dr. Das, madam?
Yes,
Oh.
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, madam. Madam, there are different literatures like colonial literature, post-colonial, then war literature, Gandhian literature, and we have differentiated in literature into different categories for our better understanding. Then, if is there any literature or any novel or drama or any poetry basing on the Spanish flu or any pandemic or any epidemic in the past? If not, then why we will call the literary output of this period is corona literature or pandemic literature? What is the reason? What is the reason? Hello.
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 Why do we want to label whatever we write into different categories? Why do we want to restrict ourselves to within particular labels? We can write about anything. We can write about today's COVID pandemic. We can link it with the Spanish flu or the plague or whatever earlier happened. And we can try to trace our historical epidemics if there had been epidemics. But to my knowledge, most of the serious epidemics which killed a lot of people happened only after the invasion by the Europeans, either in Sri Lanka, in India, in Southeast Asia, Africa, or even America, because they brought all the serious, incurable diseases to these countries. And they sometimes intentionally killed people. Now it's recorded that in America, the native Indians, to wipe out the entire tribe, they would distribute blankets which had been used by patients who died of smallpox. So that is the kind of thing that happened. So we have to actually, any literature on pandemics, I don't like to use the words colonial and post-colonial, but it is really during the colonial times that we faced a lot of pandemics. So, does it answer your question? Or?
So far my knowledge is, sir, concerned. Sir, epidemics, sir, Ebola in, sir, in Africa. Ebola, sir, pandemic in Africa, sir, created a havoc, or created so many problems, and killed many people. Sir, is there any literature on Ebola in
Ebola,
Africa?
not to my knowledge. I'm not sure whether, because
Yeah,
we
sir.
can read only if it has come out in English. So there may
Okay,
be
sir.
literature written in other languages, in their native languages. It may not have been translated into English, but
Sir.
that is something that Professor Suthidas, probably you could do some research on that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Namaste, sir. Namaste.
Well, I think that there is a lot of medical work or medical literature available on these things. But I think that if something has to become universal and remain for posterity, then it has to have something more than factual. Because if you have the emotional content, the literary content, only then that will remain as an artistic creation. Otherwise, facts are always there in medical literature, in newspapers, in documentation, they will be there. And with Ebola, I think Ebola was SARS to Ebola. They were pandemics, but then they weren't like Spanish flu, or they weren't like what is happening today with COVID-19, when people still do not have a hang of what's happening. Every day the virus is changing its, the mutation and the kind of migration, the kind of human pain, the kind of death, the kind of suffering, not only because of the disease, but because of the ramifications of the disease. That is what is important to understand. And this is some kind of human universal pain. Pain was the same throughout human civilization. And when you feel a pain of separation, of somebody dying. I got a picture, somebody sent me a video of a small child in Italy whose mother had died and of COVID-19. And this child was looking at the sky, and someone had told him his mother had become a star. So he's telling his mother, you have become a star, but how can I hug you and sleep tonight? So that is pain. Ma, you have become a star. How can who is going to feed me? I don't have milk. Who's going to give me the milk today? So that is the pain. That is literature. That is how it is, immortalized. These things have to be immortalized. So
Sir,
that can happen only in literature, colonial, post-colonial, whatever. And I agree with Dayas sir that all these things are imperialistic, they are colonial, all these diseases. Don't you think that even COVID-19 is something that has come out of this power politics? It has. And when you look at the Andaman Nicobar scenario, you see the Greater Andamanese tribe have been completely wiped off the surface of earth, the face of earth, because of British people. Okay, because of the trade they had to do in the timber trade. And now the Jarawa tribe, they are also being annihilated, and they are now down to less than 100 because we people go as tourists. We want to see we are the powerful high culture people who are rich, and we can go and see them, give them drinks, give them drugs, give them diseases. Okay, take away their habitat, constrict their habitat further and further. And this is what is the pandemic all about. And pandemic is always universalized, or the beauty of the pandemic, which is in trauma, in pain, the negative beauty is always preserved through literature. And Dayasar's poetry, the wonderful, I think I am really moved by them. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Pottersi. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to butt in and speak.
Thank you, Daya sir and Stuti madam, for such
Thank
kind
you,
of
Das, madam.
explanation.
Thank you, Das, madam. I'm humbled. Namaste, madam. Namaste.
Namaste.
I think we can get another question from Monojit Netnath. Monojit Devnath had asked, is there any pattern change in literature in relation to pandemic earlier and present? Dasher?
I'm not sure of anything except for the novels written about the cholera, because that was something that happened. But even the cholera novel, now cholera affected South Asia also after the European invasions. But I don't know of any literature written on the cholera epidemics in our part of the world.
Yeah. There's
I'm
lots
not
of
sure.
literature there because Fakir Mohan Senapati's Rebati and is all about cholera. And there are many more stories which are about cholera. And there is Marquez's own story about cholera, Love in the Time of Cholera.
Yeah.
So there are stories because anything that happens, like even there is a gas tragedy, then you have literature on that. If there is a Syrian, I mean that epidemic, I would call that an epidemic because that's an epidemic of war. That's an epidemic which is going on everywhere. Okay, religious warfare. If there is, I mean migration, mass migration because of war, that pain is also inscribed either through testimonies, through interviews, through all those kinds of things. Like I read a fantastic book called by what's her name, anyway, it is like The Voices from Chernobyl. Alexevich, she got the Nobel Prize. Yes. So those are not stories per se. And then there are the stories from Kashmir. So you see pandemics or, these kinds of mass annihilation, mass migration, and killing, like partition literature, everything has literature. The moment something happens, there are sensitive people, there are writers, there are poets, there are playwrights who immediately transform them into immortal literature. What do you say, sir?
Yes, because but what I don't agree is sometimes because after all our arts, our writing, our dramas, our films, all that became too commercialized. Then the motive was uh, bigger sales, bigger profits, and they played for the crowds. And so that way, the humanity, the humane side of the stories got lost. So that is what I have been trying to emphasize during the COVID, that if we can be more humane, if we can look at things in a more humane way and try to reduce the mind about the violence, about the hatred. Now that is why I don't agree with the present day partition literature or the continuing discussions on the partition literature, because it only keeps the hatred alive. And
Absolutely. I agree
so
with you.
we,
They call it re-memory,
yeah,
and I don't believe that this re-memory is going to help anybody.
yes. If
Absolutely,
we are,
absolutely.
yeah, if we are to write about partition literature, let's write about the few good things that happened. How people saved even people of other races or other regions or whatever, even risking their own lives. So there are enough stories like that which we can where we can rebuild the love among our people rather than the hatred, because some of the partisan literature really turns the victims into the next generation victimizers. So that is why we have to be careful even about the COVID. If we are writing, let's try to write about ways so people can react better if something happens again like this. And we should be able to, that's my last poem. I said, if we work together, then we can face any threat either from a virus or from man himself. We have to look at that. Okay.
I agree.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your good illustration and explanation. Thank you, madam, also. I think that we are running short of time, and our next speaker is waiting. We can take only one question from Dr. Sunit Kumar Bera, and he asked that I have a question to Daya sir. Sir, what will be the future prospect of education in post-COVID period?
I
Very
think,
relevant question.
yeah, I think the COVID has made a lot of changes in our thinking about education, because education by this education is not just learning something to get a certificate, get some qualifications uh, with the motive of finding a job or finding a promotion or just to boast about. So that is why there is a proliferation of bogus universities issuing bogus doctorates, not only degrees. Now in Sri Lanka, a week ago, there was a number of honorary doctorates awards by a university which is not found anywhere in the world. So now this way,
Hello.
yeah, with the
Sir, my
COVID,
question is,
yeah. No, so what I'm
the
trying to come
LTT
is,
created
no,
many problems in Sri Lanka.
hello,
Is there any
hello, sorry, can't hear you.
literature?
Hello.
Hello, please say your name first. I think the Sarojini ma'am is going to say.
Yes, Sarojini, I can hear you. Can you repeat again? Hello.
I think she has some network issues.
Uh-huh.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Sir.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yes.
is that.
I guess she was
My
trying to
question
ask
is,
about the LTT and literature. Yeah. Yes.
sir.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, please tell
My
your
question
question.
is, sir.
Hello.
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 Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. Tell your question. Tell your question
LTT
fast
created
because
any literature?
On
Hello.
on LTT. Are there any
on the
literature
LTT.
Many
question
questions.
types?
The
Hello.
LTT created many problems in
Yes.
Sri Lanka.
Yes. Yes.
The LTT created many problems in Sri Lanka. Is there any literature?
Lots of
There are very few literature. There's very few written in English. There was one novel which came out last year. It's really about what happened after the LTT, because there are so many, there are thousands of who are called war widows, whose husbands died during the war, either on the side of the LTT or on the side of the armed forces. So the war widows in the north, in the regions that under the LTT, they suffered a lot and they are still suffer social stigma. And on that, there is one novel that has been published last year. Otherwise, before that, there was another novel called Rails Run Parallel by one writer from Jaffna, Ayadure Santhan. I will send you some of the links of the novels. There were only two novels which were really violent novels, thrillers written by a Sri Lankan singer writer, but they are glorifying the war, glorifying the war heroes. Even that, only about two novels have been written. There must be some writing in Tamil which has not been translated into English yet.
Sir, I beg your pardon. I think, the diaspora, Sri Lankan diaspora in America has written something about it, and they have given a more balanced view. of both the Tamil LTT and the Sinhala people, the war between them, and what happened in Colombo and what happened in other places. One such, I have that.
Yeah, yes, yes, but I have read some of those diaspora on the
No,
during the
this
our
person
ethnic
is
war,
Naomi
but
Munawir.
they are all
Acha.
second hand or even third hand reports because they have no experience of what happened here.
Absolutely.
They are
Absolutely.
only listening to people, and whoever tell them the story, they are one-sided stories. So you can't get a very balanced report from anyone who is writing from overseas, and they are also writing for the readers in the West. So that's why this Ayature Santhan, he is a Tamil writer, but he has written a couple of very impartial novels because he speaks Sinhala also and he has worked in the South. So he has written two good novels, and this, about the war widows is one good novel. And even the people who claim who were members of the LTT who has written a couple of novels. There was one novel written in Australia by a Sri Lankan former, claimed to be former LTT member. But they are also not completely impartial. So we don't know when we will get a really impartial novel. But there are one or two books that can be read, like now in Jaffna, Tamil professor at the Jaffna University was killed by the LTTE because she was trying to bring about reconciliation. And her daughter and the mother was shot in front of a young daughter. So she somehow managed to go to USA. She studied there. Now she's a professor in a US university. She has written a book, some sort of an autobiographical novel, In My Mother's House. That is something which she has written out of the pain she experienced there. So there are a few books like that, but nothing that really has come out about the war or how what we should learn from that war and how we could avoid that kind of situation in the future. So that is the kind of literature we need. So far, not much has come out. But I'll try to compile a list of the English books that are available and I'll share it with you.
Thank you so much. I would love to have them. And I mean, if you could tell me where I could buy them, I would be most grateful.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again, and many, many thanks to all of you for cooperating and discussing so many issues related to our COVID and literature and society. So now it is the time for our next speaker. So now I am inviting Dr. Shubhodeep Paul, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Bankura University, to deliver his speech on pestilence, precarity, and anti-humanistic topos in Jack London's The Scarlet Plague, published in 1912, where we see the story takes place in 2073. Before I'm going to start his lecture, let us have a glance about Dr. Shubhodeep Pal. Dr. Shubhodeep Pal is currently Assistant Professor at the Department of English, School of Literature, Language and Cultural Studies, Bankura University. He had formerly taught at the PG Department of English, Maulana Azad College, Kolkata, and was a guest faculty at the PG Department of English, Lady Brabourne College, Kolkata. He was a UGC Senior Research Fellow at Jadavpur University. His MPhil was on a re-evaluation of South Asian diasporic sensibility in Indian expatriate literature, and his PhD was a critique of East-West cultural appropriation in Indian English fiction. He has co-edited Anxieties, Influences and After, a collection of critical essays on post-colonialism and neo-colonialism, Worldview publisher, in association with the Wimbledon Press, UK, 2009. Fine Sketches, Infinite Riches, 2009, his first book of poems from Writers' Workshop, Kolkata, receives critical acclaim. He was the co-director of a 2-year major research project 2016 to 18, entitled Discoursing the Homeless Elderly Tropos, Desires and Contentment, funded by ICSSR in collaboration with the University of Swansea, UK. His fictional and non-fictional writings have featured in Narrow Road Journal, Blue Mineral Literary Journal, Earthen Lamp Journal, the Four Quarters Magazine, Northeast Review, the Sunday Statesman, the Telegraph, Hindustan Times, and Louth Press, Edinburgh. So, such a long list of Subhadeep Pal's bio. So let's enjoy Subhadeep Pal's lecture. Subhadeep, please start your lecture.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I extend my heartiest thanks to Pashkura Bondamani College, the Teachers Training Department, and the IQSC for inviting me over for this lecture. I thank the Honorable Principal, Dr. Nandan Bhattacharya, and you, Professor Shivashish Jana, for making this happen. Before I begin, I must definitely acknowledge my indebtedness to Daya sir for forming a sort of a very necessary prelude to my lecture. He has given a panopticon and socialist perspective on the current crisis that we are facing all over the world. And before I come into the nuances of why I chose this particular topic for discussion, let us understand that the present situation as we are witnessing it has hopelessly or very hopefully, I'm not sure about that, embroiled the good and the bad of human life. You know, on one hand, I am seeing so many charities taking place on a daily basis, so much of charitable work extended. We are all part of that. And on the other hand, we are also witnessing, human selfishness and isolationism, which is operating by side. On one hand, we have read about, bioterror tactics in epics, the Mahabharata, and many other classical works that we have in our repertoire. And on the other hand, when I am teaching or lecturing on some of the preceding works from the West counterpart, there is a plethora of works on dystopian futures, which also alarms me considerably. So a mutation, migration, as we have just listened to, is all part of the world. Why I am stressing on that is to focus on the fact that we must emerge from our anthropocentric concentration and understand that the world is not only for humans. A humane understanding of this world should necessarily take into account the non-humans as well, which we collectively as an international civilization have failed to do so. So with that, let me formally begin. I have titled my paper, Pestilence, Precarity, and the Anti-Humanistic Pause in Jack London's The Scarlet Plague, 1912. The very title of my paper will show you that COVID-19, being the most critical global medical crisis facing the world today, has obviously exercised its ramifications on literature, environment, and society, veritably on all walks of human life. There are problems equally and more urgent, as the sir had pointed out, like unemployment, food crisis, lack of universal health care, climate change, etc., that have led us to examine what Elizabeth K. Rosen describes as a collusion of apocalypse and the postmodern imagination. And all this is because COVID-19 has thrust on us perhaps a nihilistic vision of the future. We are still hopeful nonetheless. And most importantly, and unpredictably predicated on the lines of precarity of our lives. which will determine everything associated with our lives, our education, our politics, culture, environment, and material civilizations. My choice of this novel for discussion is very decisive. The Californian author Jack London is more famous for novels like The Call of the Wild and White Fang, operating on the lines of allegorical beast fables, but has also written the century pandemic in his home state. The year, mind you, is I think 2073. So we have not yet reached state, but we shall be discussing it. It is indeed surprising to note how the acceleration of material civilizations also deaccelerates medical contingencies. So the more technocratic our states become, the more medically challenged it seems to be. Besides, epidemics have a cyclical pattern of repetition. We have seen SARS, MERS, Ebola, the HIV virus, we have had a talk about that, resurfacing time to time. COVID-19 is said to be dying down as abruptly as it began, with implementation of a vaccine or natural cycle of cure, but it is also said to be resurfacing after half a decade or a decade. That is what the medical journals are telling us. So how to account for this eco-precarity, which during emergency periods of pestilence predicates itself upon what I term as an anti-humanistic topos of being? Given the very parochiality of human nature and its lack of visionary foresight, any visionary could prophesy that pandemic endangerments and such alarming periods of uncertainty and a dystopic predicament were to become a veritable reality time and time again, as the future, both near and distant, would unfold with a shocking contingency. Now, John Chaney, better known as Jack London, was associated with realistic writing, and to an extent naturalistic writing as well, but also was a sort of a pioneer of science fiction. The exact term for this is soft science fiction. London was influenced by economic trendsetters like the Klondike Gold Rush, the South Pacific environment, his activism in unionization, workers' rights, socialism, and eugenics, his experience with dystopic fiction or dystopian fiction in the novel The Iron Heat, his father's practice of astrology, his stepfather, a Civil War veteran, etc., definitely veered him towards apocalyptic writing. In a short story, I'm not sure about the exact title, it could be Diable or it could be Batard. In any one of these two short stories, there is a cruel French Canadian who incidentally brutalizes his dog, the kind of senseless violence that we keep talking about time to time again. And in retaliation, the dog kills the man. London firmly believed that man's actions were the main cause of the behavior of animals. In fact, Jack London's marriage was also strained considerably by the threat of contagion. To give you an example, his first wife, Elizabeth May, also known as Bessie Madden, had 2 children, but it was an extremely incompatible marriage. According to London, Bessie was so devoted to physical authority that Jack was shelved away. Bessie used code words to ward London away, fearing that he was consorting with prostitutes, sex workers, and might bring home venereal diseases. London's interest in agrarian fiction was also heightened when he sought to create his own Eden, appraised with what he called ecological wisdom. in the 1,000-acre N11 Sonoma Country Ranch, also known as Beauty Ranch, that he purchased in 1905. Animal activism was also strong up in his cards, conditioned by atheism, socialism, and concerns over the race problem. London's ideas were decisively futuristic. For instance, the most important that will concern us today is the problem of Asian immigration. Most of you know about the resultant Asian immigration in the United States following the gold rush, which was at that point of time known as the Yellow Peril, which led to the 1910 essay that he had written known as the Unparalleled Invasion, where it is shown, and very alarmingly, a historical future somewhat predicated between the years 1976 to 1987, where it is shown that China is harboring megalomaniac designs because of its ever-increasing population. Realizing the Chinese threat of imperial expansion, the Western powers in this particular tract decide to curtail and contain this threat through biological warfare. So although we have seen that in recent times, Jacquard's The Eyes of Darkness has caught the popular imagination because of the mention of the term Wuhan 400, perhaps the manufactured virus, we realize that Black London was not too far behind. China, the nation, in London's essay, is bombarded with dozens of infectious diseases. So the Western powers, they bombard China not with bombs, but with infectious contagia. London was aware of Occidental race egotism, but also empathized with the other in stories like the Mexican, the Shinago, Kulan, the Leaper, etc. Now, we all know why a local infection in China ultimately became a global pandemic today. The reason is primarily the accelerated transportation systems that we have, for which the spread became rapid. In 1912, when London's book was written, the world was not so speedily connected by travel. But London anticipated increasing human mobility and transportation in times to come. The story is located in 2073. I've already pointed it out to you. 60 years after, as it is in the story, the Red Death has depopulated the planet. I'm not sure whether the choice of the virus in this case, or the plague in this case, the Scarlet Plague, the Red Death, has anything to do with Red China, like the whole idea of an almost sensorial autocracy taking place in the name of communism. And incidentally, it gives me goosebumps to tell you that this year I was supposed to attend an international conference in Thailand, which obviously got cancelled because of the pandemic news alert. And the organizers said that things will improve very soon. And Thailand is well protected. I don't know if this is true or not, but later I came to know that the first nation that actually caught the virus other than China was Thailand, from where, of course, it started spreading all over the world. So this is the kind of, irony of human living that I would like to point out today, that this is a situation, this situation of alarm, this situation of an emergency where we are all hopelessly connected. The rich and the poor, the elite and the subaltern. Well, yes, some people have more access to protection, some don't, but there is a sense of internationalism which is associated with the new normal. I'm not sure whether we will be wise enough to keep that sustained, but then that is something we need to negotiate time and time again. So coming back to the novel, we have as a protagonist a character called James Smith. the elderly survivor still living in Francisco Bay area. Now, Smith narrates about the Scarlet Plague to his grandsons. He has two grandsons, Hoo and Harelip, who now live in a primitivist environment. Mentions this, that maybe our future is not in a state of hyper accelerated post-humanism as we are thinking it would be, but there will be a collapse of capitalist civilizations, and there would be a return to primitivism, and maybe then the ideals of Marx and Engels would be coming true. I'm not going into that speculation, but that's just a pointer in this particular case. So Hoo and Harelip, they do not inhabit a technocratic post-human civilization. They have limited intellectual and linguistic abilities. They're surviving pretty well. Smith is their grandfather, known as Grandsir, who tells them that around 2013, which we just passed by, professor in America. According to him, as he's narrating to his grandsons, the US president is appointed by what he calls a board of magnets. I don't know if I can extend the analogy to India, Brazil, many other countries under right-wing regimes right now. This is the very ideal of crony capitalism, which is shocking us, that perhaps it's not the government which is actually taking decisions, but certain de facto powers behind the governments which are discarding the welfare state model and instead going for crony capitalism, and thereby plutocracy, other forms of government. Infected people collapse to death in half an hour, a maximum period of half an hour to 1 hour. So the situation in this particular novel is more dangerous than the COVID-19 crisis that we have. But we never know whether this kind of a situation will not come in future, in the next 100 years or so. It would come time and time again, keeping in mind the fact that almost everything in history has a cyclical pattern of repetition. So this leak of contagion, which in turn leads to rioting and murders, with a pony and two, as it appears to him, but there are stray survivors here and there, and he tries to reconnect with these stray survivors, longing for human. Big civilizations have been wiped out, so it's a pretty much utopian picture, and it seems a return to age with a few survivors broken into tribes. So we find tribalism in operation. Smith realizes his memory is the sole custodian of a legacy where there were institutionalized jobs, industrial technology, social classes, cultural sophistication, and gadgetry involved, in which his grandsons have no idea about. And they also consider these as wicked. So when he narrates the story, his so-called life story, pretty much in a Estrogoin waiting for Godot, try to recollect their blood past. His grandsons find these as incredulous. They find these stories as pretty absurd from every angle. And for our protagonist in this particular novel, Smith, it becomes a civilizational disconnect for him and an existential dread as well, as his trauma, his personal trauma, finds no means of redressal. Now let us come to COVID-19 once again. COVID-19 as an emerging, rapidly evolving situation is predicated on fear and lack of the arrest of the virus. Whatever be the reason, human callousness or the lack of a vaccine or the lack of proper governmental initiatives to attend to all, COVID-19 has not been able to be controlled. It has spread. And this has given us an awareness of the fact that epidemics do spread, they turn fatal, or they turn into debilitating situations, and they turn on this turn on fear is something that London realized very well. Pandemics are also suspension of conventional normalcy. The plague, in our case, the virus itself, is the topos. And evidently, as we can find it from all the occurrences, it's very much antagonistic. So I keep telling this in almost every lecture that I attend to, that it is no longer, man is no longer the roof and crown of all creation, as Tennyson points out in Memoriam. We can no longer make that humanistic statement. All the more so because such pestilence predicated on a catastrophic realism outdid all kinds of medical relief, rekindling our ancestral fear of an infection and its consequences. Jack London's novel was inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Masque of the Red Death, which stressed on a very vital point, and I'm quoting from the text within quotations. The issue is not that people die from the plague. The issue is not that people die from the plague, but that people are plagued by death. But that people are plagued by death. So death no longer is normal. Death no longer is okay. It is not anticipated. It is accidental. It is violent. It is painful, and it leaves severe traces behind to the deceased's family members and those in his immediate social or her immediate social community. So I'm referring to some of the findings of the Journal of Emerging Infectious Diseases, and I have some startling, evidences that have come up. I'll come to them, but I'll come back to London's novel, where London is trying to, because of capitalism's excesses. I am completely in unison with my previous speaker, Daya Sir, our very esteemed Daya Sir, who has pointed out the problems of late capitalism. And it's not just the formative capitalism that we are talking about. This is the time when capitalism could collapse on its own structure any moment. And there are many ways in which it is already starting to do so. And also the issue of the lack of militaristic hygiene, which has been pointed out. So it's no wonder that we find the Chinese supremo putting the blame of the virus, the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, on American soldiers, their contagion, their callousness as having caused the war. And the US president being very candid about his declaration that no, it's a Chinese virus. So it's a blame game which has, continued and will continue, I'm sure. Nobody wants to take the onus of blame. Everybody wants to take credit for whatever good comes out of it. And as far as the issue of food consumption is concerned, I have only one take to make, which is this, that yes, people all over the world, they have different food patterns. We have to respect that. I can be a vegetarian, I can be a vegan, I can be a non-vegetarian. That's for me to decide. But at the same time, having said that, let me point out the fact that I do not think mankind will not survive if it does not consume the flesh of wild animals. When we are annihilating wildlife, we are causing a tremendous imbalance upon the entire world ecosystems that we still have surviving. So that is not excusable, whatever else might be excused. And we have seen the markets in Wuhan where much of these fowl and flesh is pilfered, and there is government well. Laboratory, and that too with, I think, considerable US patronage and support, also with the support of US billionaires. There are many stories about that. And it is also pretty ironical that the Chinese supremo should have his daughter studying at the most premier university in the United States. So let us assume that when it comes to elitist management, it is very collateral, it is very exchange worthy. But when it comes to the very common man, and by common man I'm not talking about you and me, we do not belong to the common man category. We are very, very privileged to have our salaries, our social lives, our cultural standards very well maintained even during this pandemic. We are talking about the migrants, we are talking about the nameless billions over this on this particular planet who live on this precarity. It might have seemed to some that the Earth as a green planet has benefited some bit, so it's not eco-precarity that way, but we cannot say that eco-precarity is not working as long as this symbiosis between humans and the non-humans is not properly ensured by human civilizations all over the world. Come to that later. So let me predicate my lecture in this historical milieu, where this particular milieu, as many of you might know, those of you who are interested in international relations, that it is also known as the Asian century. This is the century that has come after the European century has reached its pinnacle. Europe has very well, arranged its own economic topos of exchange. The euro is a very prominent circulating currency. There has been much talk that Asia can also do that, but this has been foiled by the Western powers in multiple ways. As many of you know, I'm not going into details, that would be a detraction from my immediate lecture. But this Asian century gives us an onus to find it a good idea to explore how in Jack London's writings it is shown, it is very well shown, that Western powers have neutralized Eastern development. Whether by biological warfare or nuclear weapons. We already have the examples of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I have been to Japan in 2015, and when I paid a visit to these places, there are no traces left. It has splendidly rebuilt itself. But I believe that the reason why we need to discuss traumatic events like nuclear explosion sites and the partition and others is not to rake up the sad part only, but to understand the legacies of these nostalgias. What kind of bearings it has had on our psychological and genetic configurations. That is the reason, that is the area where I think an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary or a transdisciplinary approach to literature, society, culture, and politics will come in. And that's what I'm trying to do in my Department of Cultural Studies, because I feel that this cannot be limited to only literary studies anymore. We artists do have a social accountability, and we have to have an understanding of the choices that we are making. So when we look at these colonies in Asia from a Chinese, Indian, North Korean angle, we have seen that there are nations in Asia that have also had superpower designs. And what we inherit from The Scarlet Plague as a novel is a mosaic of predicaments handed down from Sophocles, Oedipus the King, which shows that, which points out the causal relation between plague and sin, infection and sin. So for a very long time, as Susan Sontag also points out, that we have this idea that the infected people are, they have committed some kind of transgression. They have sinned against the natural order, and that's why this is retribution. There is also the idea of the punishments of for offenses against divinity, which you will find in book after book in the Bible, starting from Exodus, chapter after chapter, from Exodus to Isaiah. And this gives us the awareness that selfishness and avarice, but it also, in a very weird way, in a very ironical, unforeseen way, democratized human life and even death. These days we are having lectures on death, unnatural death, how our understanding of even death has changed, not only our understanding of life, based on the idea of the new normal, but even our understanding of death has changed. And postmodern life has given us this hyper accelerated consumerist way of life, because we are eternally fearing whether we will survive the next day or not, by any means or the other. And this has been a wrong choice, a wrong civilizational choice for us, because it has led to a severity of disconnect. You see, we are disconnected amongst ourselves. So leave alone how will we be connected with the non-human part of human of earthly life. So that is something that we need to talk about. The Latin poet Lucretius also mentions this. And an understanding of immunology or immunization tactics is also something that we should welcome at this stage. However, pandemics have proved, as Jack London and Mary Shelley in her novel The Last Man opined behind divine retribution, by the fact that our human limitations, something that we never acknowledge, are to take to blame. You know, somebody asked me in a previous seminar that it was a very interesting question. I'm just digressing a very little bit for your explanation. That why is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein so popular? And why is The Last Man not so popular? This was the question which was asked. Why is The Last Man even not known by many students and researchers? The way I find it is this, that Frankenstein celebrates the humanistic topos, the Western ideal of medical privilege and superiority over other forms of Orientalist and Occidentalist superiorities as well. But at the same time, there is this awareness that perhaps everything is not within human control. Perhaps the pathogens that we are now talking about, and much of this research was fostered by the likes of Robert Koch and Louis Pasteur, and there have been tremendous giant strides of progress in epidemiology. We have realized that if for any reason the normal, human, non-human setup on this planet is disturbed or destabilized, many unknown microorganisms would be let loose, And at the same time, when we are tampering with synthetic viruses and other forms of, unseen microorganismic life, we are doing that with extreme dangers to mankind. So there has been much talk about the lack of proper laboratory hygiene in the Wuhan labs, which led to a spill out and the doctors getting infected. They're trying to inform the rest of the world. These physicians were eliminated, or their records are no more found in these websites. As we know that this kind of a sensorial activity has only aggravated the problem, and yet we are still not taking up issues, because any kind of extreme measures these days could predicate into a third world war, could predicate into a nuclear aggrandizement of the sea.
Hello. Hello, sir. Hello.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible. There was a brief snap. Yeah. Shivashis, I'm audible?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
I'll continue. So there is this idea of, like bacteriologists and virologists giving us assurances which have not proved futile, but it has been realized that, natural organisms, microorganisms can be deadly and can be doubly fatal when manufactured in the labs. So fortunately, COVID-19, fortunately for some reason or the other, COVID-19 was not life-threatening. By that I mean to say that it's not that if you catch the disease, you are bound to die. There are issues of comorbidity involved, and there are interfaces that have to be concerned. There are also some holistic treatment options available till we await the proper vaccine. But I want to stress on this point that let us not think, even for a second, that if a vaccine comes in the market, which it will, and I'm very utopian and hopeful about that. If it does come in the market in the recent future, it's not going to be a utopian situation for us for the rest of our lives. Because you see, there will be this back to the old normal, which I think might again risk the chances of contagion time to time again. I pointed out, I'm reminding you of the fact once again, that just 6 years had passed since Jack London wrote this novel, that the Spanish flu came and visited this planet. I don't know how long it stayed, but it's supposed to have killed 20 million people. So that's the extent of precarity that I am talking about, which I think we have not taken learning lessons from. We have a plaque in Japan which says that this lesson will, this inaction will not be repeated. We will no longer tamper with nuclear energy. But have we listened? We have had, so many nuclear explosions now based on hydrogen bombs, even more deadlier, that have been cause for perhaps many kinds of cancers and other forms of ailments in this world today. Not going into that, but understanding the fact that when Jack London talks about 2073, then we have to understand that there is an irony in the midst of this universal panic, which is at the heart of the civilization, that we live civilized lives. We say that Prospero is civilized and Caliban is a natural savage or a barbarian, whatever it is. But we realize that when these kind of emergency situations arise, we do not have paradise on earth anymore. It's a veritable pandemonium which is ensured. So before antimicrobial and antiviral resistance could make headway, the existing civilization was collapsing as people were collapsing everywhere. This instill a sense of humility, which is exactly what Daya sir had talked about, and decency, and understanding that human expansion and intervention has and should have its limitations into the ways and laws of nature. A sort of a Faustian warning, let us put it that way. But dystopian models of fiction, trend set by the likes of Jack London and Mary Shelley, have only heightened or shown in a very highly predicated manner human callousness, recklessness, and irresponsibility. Health workers and researchers were glorified, but were also ostracized and hurt by their own community members. Moreover, private corporation giants have thrived multiple times during this pandemic. Pharmaceutical companies have profited in millions by scavenging on helpless patients, and an entire healthcare system has collapsed to meet the new demand. Media misdirection and fake news issues over the internet have become triggers for alarmism as well. The worst thing about COVID-19
in relation to London's Scarlet Plague is the sheer undecidability of the nature of the synthetic virus that has baffled everyone. So public risk perception has been profoundly influenced with reference to London's novel. Human life continues in alignment with natural primitivism, and we are witnessing a return to nature, a more organic return to nature. You know, these days we are doing this. We are cultivating our own veggies. We are taking to rooftop cultivation. We are seriously concerned with rainwater harvesting. We are bound to buy from the small scale vendors who come with their carts. We are no longer wanting to visit the supermarkets. It is time that we realize this self-sustaining mechanism of living, of mutual coexistence, has to be ensured in times to come. And based on that, this can create a bulwark to mass hysteria and fallouts. Incidentally, down the line, we have had a host of other epidemics that have come and gone. The lists have already been provided. And we have also had a plethora of literary works like George R. Stewart's Earth Abides, 1949, Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, 1954, Stephen King's The Stand, 1978. These were inspired by London's novel. Even movies, I've had lecture talks on that, like 12 Monkeys, 1995, 28 Days Later, 2002, Carriers, 2009, and very recently, 2011, the very famous movie Contagion, that were equally inspired by Jack London's novel. So they are very close to our lives now. We are re-examining them in the present context, maybe to understand our present better. That's the reason why we then gone away, but to understand its cyclical or chiral repetition, as B.Ed pointed out, in our present day lives, as well as in the imagined and possible futures of tomorrow. So based on that, I would conclude with this observation that pandemics and epidemics, they come and go. They will come and go. That is the nature of these microorganisms and our human activity. Not everyone will learn, but our process of enlightenment, not the Western enlightenment, but our spiritual enlightenment, our eco-critical connectedness with this planet must be sustained. We must not only listen to Elon Musk. So whether we learn anything from these lessons remains an issue to be debated and pondered upon. Thank you very much for your patience and deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shubhadeep Paul, for your excellent speech regarding pestilence, precarity, and the anti-humanistic topos. I think that I know it that he is a voracious reader, and with his vast ocean of knowledge enriched us. Really overwhelmed and really just spellbound by your lecture. And he is very mature in mind and always reading terms, theories, and with too much knowledge in his storehouse, and very young in spirit. And there are good references of Tensions in Memoriam, Mary Shelley's The Last Man, Frankenstein, Modern Prometheus, W.B.Yeats, Louis Pasteur, Stephen King, and so on. So really, I think that the title is really interesting. Also, the Scarlet Plague, and this particular book is thinking about 2073. So, and the last concluding, what is really interesting: epidemics may come and go, but we remain and we live with so much silence, with so much peace and harmony. So, spiritual enlightenment can just give us that particular boost us to just wipe out such pandemic. Okay, thank you, Shubhadeep. Now we must go for go for interaction session. I think that the questions will come out. I just must go for the audience. Let's have some questions or observations.
Sir, I'm
Yes.
Sarojini Sahu from Odisha.
Yes. Yes, madam. Please
My
go ahead.
question is,
Yes.
yes, is legacy based on Saturn ideology? What is the legacy of repression?
Ma'am,
Sir?
could you repeat the question once again?
Yes. Is legacy based on Saturn ideology? What is the legacy of repression?
Legacy of repression.
Yes.
Could you elucidate a bit more so that I can catch you? If you could rephrase your question like a bit.
Is legacy based on Saturn ideology? What is the legacy of repression?
Repression.
Yes.
I'm not being able to really understand the exact ramification of your question. Like, are you talking about human repression?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, that is a very important issue to ponder about. That there are diabolical concerns, and there are diabolical issues, satanic imperatives that are there. And having said that, I feel that these pandemics have shown us that a majority of the human population on this planet basically has had a life without the basics. Okay, our governments, their choices have failed to deliver the safety, the medical care, the coverage and the protection that we have expected. So what has happened in due course of time, other than the fact that we expect democratization of the vaccine as well, we hope it will be available to the common market. But at the same time, let me understand that these pandemics and epidemics have brought the worst from us. Definitely, it has shown the worst side of humanity. But it has also shown a positive side of humanity. You know, it has finally made us understand that it can no longer be a subjective concentration of the self that can really make things happen. You know, increasingly in works, in many different literary works, like in a previous lecture, I referred to Jhumpa Lahiri's The Lowland, quite a contemporary work, where there is this example provided that this new generation of young people, they are moving away from the supermarkets and a world of hyper accelerated consumption that Daya sir had also talked about. But how much do we actually need? You know, why do we need a concentration of wealth in the hands of a few people, which is very alarming, so to say. The way, you know, Jeff Bezos, for instance, let me also point this out, that Amazon, for instance, and it's not the only company, there are many such companies that have, you know, literally doubled their market value or their net worth. They have profited much from this pandemic. And I myself have been a victim of the lack of a delivery of an item, you know, which was worth 600 rupees. It might seem less for some people, it might seem a lot for a lot of people. But I was imagining that the way these companies have their entire circuit system operated, where you have literally no voice of redressal. You know, if my electric bill comes in an astronomical amount, or if something else happens where these corporations do things which are completely, not called for, we as normal citizens, we really don't have any point of redressal. So time has come when we have to, if not for everything, have to re-examine our own consumption systems. And the way we have repressed a lot of our origins, they have to be re-examined now. Maybe that will enable us a greater connect and help us emerge from a satanic world and maybe make it more in terms of the divinitas that we all talk about. So that's the way I see things, basically. Yeah. Any other question, observation? Yeah, you're welcome.
Sir,
yeah,
I am
please go ahead.
Sir, I am Dr. Pranavananda Joshi from Odisha, sir.
Oh, welcome, sir. Welcome. Yeah.
Sir, so far, I gained from your talk, sir, the knowledge that I gained from your talk, sir. Actually, sir, the pandemic, the terror created, or the terror or the horror or the fear created by the machinery. Machinery means, sir, media and government is more dangerous than the epidemic, sir, than the pandemic, sir. Actually, we are living in, we means all the people in our country or other countries, are all are living, sir, in a panic. Particularly, sir, the condition of the migrant workers, particularly the condition of the laborers, and the so-called low class people are beyond our expectation, beyond our imagination, sir. Then, sir, how can, sir, we recover financially or mentally from this pandemic, sir?
Yeah. See, I mean, this is a very important question, and this actually calls for a re-examination. Okay, this calls for a re-examination of our entire life patterns. You know, I'll give you some examples. Like, I have to listen to the media. The media is very important. Mind you, when Jack London wrote this novel, then the media was not so rampant. They had to rely on the newspaper. The newspaper man was a very important person for them because they wanted to know what was happening outside their homes as well. But how can we actually benefit from media representations? The best way to do that is not to listen to any particular media house, to look at the media representations of many different houses, not to read only one newspaper, to read the news circulation of many different, news media, so that the truth will automatically dawn to you. And then you can make your choices. When we go to a supermarket, we look at the printed price and we have to buy that because there is a barcode attached. But then we will bargain for 2 rupees even for an old woman who has come to sell some guavas or oranges. So maybe it also calls for a mentality change in all of us. We really have to understand that being human is not necessarily being humane. We have to synthesize our living with the greater world at large. There is a very wonderful picture where there are many different animals, and in this circle, man is part of the circle. That is one way of viewing the biocentric world. Whereas there is another picture where there are animals and man is at the center. That is the anthropocentric world. So we have to perhaps discard that anthropocentric world and emerge into a more holistic way of consumption, of living. We have to consume. We can't do without consuming. Even when I'm living in a picture, I have a fan running, I have lights running, but I have switched off the AC because I feel at this particular temperature, I can do without it. So if everyone realizes that conservation issues, our accountability towards the rest of the world, maybe, the medical will also be taken care of. These are separate issues. The medical science problem is one issue. The media thing is another issue. And our choice of governments, the way we support governments, the way we criticize governments has thought about. When jobs are not given to us, we have to find out alternative ways of living. alternative ways of employment generation. And that is where I think a change is already coming. A change has come. The only thing we have to do is we have to sustain that. And that can only happen when people ask for a collective change. In Norway, in Sweden, for instance, people do not question why I should go to my office in a bicycle. People support that. People have supported that so much that the government have been forced to make bicycle tracks. And well, they operate long-term distances on eco-fuel, but the short-term travel is always on predicated on bicycles. It's not there between us because we really do not think that we are actually standing on a landmine. We are standing on a volcano, which is what Amitav Ghosh keeps talking about time to time again. That when we talk about ecological conservation, we must realize that the dangers are not predicated 100 years later. The dangers are right here. We are facing that today. So we have to support the green camp rather than the right-wing corporate camps, and we have to rally against them. We have to understand that these activisms have to be strengthened in times to come. That is the only way possible. That's the only way we can extend our survival. Otherwise, we will be eliminated. Okay, there are some other questions, perhaps. Yes, there are. Vera asks, what is the condition of environment at present in the COVID-19 situation, impact on literature? See, apparently it seems that pollution levels have come down because of a less, consumption of fossil fuels. But then as it happens that once, lockdowns are lifted and once, people are now fearing the virus less, people have waited and they have become reckless. You see, I see this kind of right-wing recklessness in the American universities as well, that students are now, deciding that they would be going on campus, they would be throwing their caution to the winds, they would be using their masks as, not as face covers, but as accessories to sport. And I find this, spirit of recklessness, which has been associated with the land of El Dorado, the spirit of liberty, equality, and fraternity, that is wrong. That is not liberty. As George Bernard Shaw said, that your walking stick ends where my nose begins, so you can't hit me. You can turn it around and around. So we have to be more sensitive about how others are affecting us and how we are affecting others. This sense of mutual interdependence is now lost, and that is why we have so much of hate and violence, perhaps very mindless as well. Mindless violence, endemic forms of violence, which have to be countered, which have to be thought of, and which have to be passed on to the next generations to come. That, yes, you have to see alternative visions of the future. Otherwise, this is not going to be possible. The next question is, what is the role of an academician to the societal management among big stakeholders of student communities in our academic sphere? Big. My answer is, if you think it is negligible, it is negligible. If you think it is mammoth, it is mammoth. You see, I can, for instance, tell you this, that I can very well say that what can I do as an academic or as a poet, as a writer, what can I do? How much of the general human population can I reach out? There is this automatic question that I can ask myself. But it is not necessarily about how much. You see, even if you influence one person, even if you influence one animal, you take care of the crows coming to your house, you attend to a couple of poor people, you raise a small charity and you influence the lives of some immediate people that are suffering from, or you contribute to funds the way we have all been doing. We have very voluntarily allowed the relinquishment of a certain part of our salaries. And even after that, we have contributed to other, care funds and other things, relief funds. both private and government. And at the same time, we have taken some initiatives as well, braving and risking our own lives at times. And this is something we have to think about, we have to set examples for. If we can't, maybe, one day it will recoil on us and it will backfire. You see, this is the thing that we have to learn from some of our leaders as well, that some of them have been fighting in the forefront, some of them have been shielding themselves in the back. All of us should be protected. I'm not saying that we should throw protection and caution to the wind, but at the same time, there is this need to reach out, and we must re-examine governmental model systems. Let us not understand that America is not at all the best form of life or government. There are other nations that have not been given due media limelight for very deliberate reasons. Look at New Zealand, look at Taiwan, look at Canada. These are nations that have done much well compared to nations like America, or I should now say even India as well, because for the last 5 to 7 years, India has completely abandoned the welfare state model, and it has adopted a non-welfare state, a rather, proto-capitalist, model of governance. And I'm not against privatization, I'm not against globalization, I'm not against multinational investment, but at the same time, let us also understand that it is not necessary, to always endorse something because it is fashionable. I can wear a Levi's jeans, but I used to wear a lot of, foreign branded products at one point of time in my life. But for the last 2-3 years, I'm not doing that. I'm buying clothes from small shops and, handicraft emporiums, and I'm doing pretty well. I'm pretty happy with my choices. So these are the small ways we can begin changing our own lives and gradually start influencing others as well. I don't think there is anything else. How much, Otonu Mondol asks, how much it being beneficial over this pandemic situation in nature after COVID-19 storm for living creatures? Well, you see, this is actually a very wrong idea that living creatures have been saved a lot. What has actually happened is this, that they have got a bit more breathing space. They could travel without fear. They have not been arrested due to the lockdowns. And we have seen a more colorful world. I don't know whether we can celebrate that in times to come. But at the same time, understand this as well, that when lockdowns happen, there are food shortages. It is difficult to feed wild animals in zoos. There are food shortages there as well. There are funding shortages there as well. So we have to rethink about our population crisis, the way we design our lives, and the way, natural disasters like Amphan and other cyclones, they have even affected non-human creatures as well. How do we account for greater afforestation? When we talk about the pandemic, we do not only talk about the virus and its relation to humans. We talk about a host of interdependent factors that have to be taken into consideration. Let us be more sensitive than only intellectual. I think that is what is called for. And I am not sure whether I should call man the roof and crown of all creation, as Tennyson had said, because man has done some very inhuman things, so to say. And there are countless movies where it is mentioned that there would be, cyborgs, and there would be post-humans that would be taking over and making this world better than the way we could actually ensure it. I'm not so sure, but just reminding you of that Terminator movie where the cyborg realizes that lives have to be saved, whereas we, despite being humans, we are only hell-bent on thinking about ourselves, and we are also on an eliminationist spree. So it's time for these micro reconsiderations to be given due weight. I hope I can stay hopeful about that, and not just stay hopeful, work on these issues as well. That's it, I think. There is one more question about the migrant problem, particularly the women doubled the problem by reaching home. This question is important, but I would also want this question to be a bit rephrased in my own terms, because you see, people have to reach homes. You can't deny that, I am talking about a migrant, maybe a woman, a child, a man. The gender or the age group or the race or the class is not important. It's the human being who is alive. That is the most important consideration. Now, if I panic about reaching home safe, it is a human predicament that everyone has to reach home safe, Everyone has to have a place of shelter in this world. Every refugee, every migrant, everyone who is there. And the problem is not that by containing these people, we can actually prevent the pandemic completely. The main thing, the main problem is this, that it is a question of prioritization. We give prioritization to building places of worship, but we do not prioritize the fact that these people, they are also giving votes. They are also working for the welfare of the nation. They are also making the economy run. So just because they do not have a platform to speak, unlike you and me, doesn't mean that they will have to be treated as discardable. The question or the issue is not whether they should or should not reach home. The question is how much importance has been given to their reaching home safely without contamination in sanitized transportation systems. That is something we have to think about. Maybe we were not prepared for this pandemic. If a pandemic comes 5 years later, 3 years later, 10 years later, will we take a learning lesson from COVID-19, or will we simply forget everything after the vaccine arrives? Will we get back to our class stratified society once more? So that is the question. It's time, it's high time the common people start asking the right questions instead of skirting about the bush. So I'm very happy that you have asked this question. You've pointed out this question, because the migrant crisis is an associated problem with the pandemic, and we really cannot deny that or do away with that. And it has not stopped. Those people who have reached their homes might now have to come back to their places of work, realizing that things will stabilize, because there is no work back home. And unless you work, there is no money. How would you feed your children? How would lives run? So mobility is there, it would be there. But the idea is the safety, the welfare of the citizen. So we have to think about bringing back the welfare state, whichever way it is possible.
Sir, I put the question because the migrant workers, particularly the women, sir, because I had seen, sir, flocks of men and women, sir, were passing on the road. On my small village, sir, I am just staying in a small village, and a woman, sir, gave birth to a child, sir, on the road. And the scene, the miserable and the horrible scene. And also there are some women gynec problems. They face a lot on the way, sir. So
absolutely, absolutely. And I would also like to add this. add to this that I myself had to travel for a very emergency reason from one house to another. I did it on my personal car, so I was shielded. I had double masks on, sanitized, and all that. But when I was traveling the highways at the early stages of the pandemic, this was sometime between March and April, I could see that there were countless people traveling on matadors, crowded together, because alternative transport systems were simply not available. You know, there were not enough thought which was paid to them. And also remember that a couple of days back, I had given a lecture on partition literature. I had pointed out to a Bengali partition story. In that particular story, I'm forgetting the name, I'll put it later to Shivashishda, which is that it is mentioned that there was this transportation happening from one part to another. People were fleeing because of partition persecution. So a woman, a Hindu woman, was traveling with her husband in a train compartment. Compartment was filled with both Hindu and Muslim men. You know, perhaps she was, along with one or two other women, the only women in that train compartment. And she was in the last stage of her pregnancy, and her water broke, and she had to rush to the loo, the bathroom, the washroom, in order to deliver the baby in absolutely unhygienic conditions. The baby died and the mother died. And there was this Muslim man who was sitting all through, time and time, and the story is narrated through his eyes, his absolute helplessness, that I could not do anything. You know, I don't know the medical, I don't have the medical knowledge, I don't have the kits. I didn't know that a pregnant woman would be having to leave her house at this point of time. And the sheer helplessness, human helplessness that we have during these moments. So this is what we have to learn. These are the learning lessons that we have to learn, that we have to be more empathetic, not just sympathetic, more empathetic in times to come. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Thank you very much.
I was reading biography by Manoranjan Vyapari.
Yes.
My channel life.
Yeah.
Sir, integrating my channel life. Sir, in that novel, sir, it is also a part of partition literature, sir. Also,
absolutely.
It is also partition literature, sir. And Vyapari sir has beautifully narrated the pathos and the agony and influences of the people, those who were staying on that camp. Actually, sir, I forgot the name of the camp.
Absolutely.
Sir.
Well, I interacted with Vyapari sir on several forums, and I have even read that book. And we have to understand that these problems are also percolated, they are accelerated due to our caste prejudices, our class divisions, gender prejudices. There are hosts of problems associated with the virus. So I hope that, you know, COVID-19, for all its debilitations, has also had this bright side about it, that it has made many of us re-examine our lives and the way we want to lead our lives in times to come. I hope all of you who have attended these lectures and will be attending the forthcoming lectures tomorrow, whatever you pick up as knowledge, instruction, and your own sharing, this would be disseminated further down the line in other portals, not just as knowledge systems, but also part of our welfare work, part of our social work. And we can together bring about a change. So that is the call of the times, definitely. Yeah. There are no more questions, I think. So over to you, Shivashishda.
Thank you, really thank you, Dr. Shubhadeep, because such a kind of excellent lecture with so much illustration and elaboration. And I think also thank you, Patoshi sir, because of referring our Manoranjan Vyapari's Itibritte Chondal Jibon. And that's an excellent book, really. And I think it is translated by Shivra Mukherjee by interrogating Chondal.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that book is really
humble, sir. Humble.
Really a classic book. So let's just going to have our finishing touch and thank you, Shubhadeep, for such a kind of excellent lecture. Really, thanks.
You're very
Really,
welcome.
thanks. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Now it is the time of a vote of thanks, and a vote of thanks will be given by our honorable uh, Assistant Professor Shukla Rai. And before I am going to call Shukla Rai, I think it's the time for Tuhin sir. Tuhin sir, please declare something if it is necessary.
No information, sir. Thank you.
Regarding feedback,
All the sessions. Feedback form will be given tomorrow. It's a two-day webinar, so keep patience. After the second talk tomorrow, it will be given. Thank you, and all the participants are requested with the same Google Meet link for tomorrow's session, which will be started at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuhin, for such information. Now I am inviting Professor Shukla Roy to give vote of thanks.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Sir. Okay. We have completed the first day of our, and thank you, Shivasi sir, for giving me the opportunity. I am feeling honored to get this opportunity to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of Panchpura Bonamali College. It's our privilege to have such an eminent personalities among us as resource person of this webinar on impact of COVID-19 on society, literature, and environment. I want to express my gratitude to Honorable Principal Sir, Professor Dr. Nandan Bhattacharya, for being with us and enlightening us with his insightful ideas. Thank you so much, sir. My heartfelt thanks to our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Nirmal Das, who always motivates and guides us to adopt new and innovative ideas. My sincere thanks to Dr. Badshah Ghosh, who always helps us to develop enthusiasm and vigor to surge ahead of all. And also thanks to Dr. Raju Singh for his dedicated support and cooperation. A big thanks to Daya Dishanayak sir, our first speaker, for his efforts towards humanity and tolerance to open up through literature, which is very crucial in this worldwide panic mood. And I may like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Shubhadeep Paul for giving an excellent coverage to the Scarlet Plague, a post-apocalyptic fiction novel written by Jack London. Sir has described pestilence, precarity, and anti-humanistic topos very nicely. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Tuhin Kaur sir and Sivasis Jana sir for the perfect logistic support, guidance, and enormous cooperation to make this event successful. I want to extend my generous thanks to participants and all members of Teachers Training family, Bijoli De, Anushri Dotto, Mondira Pal, Tuhin Singh, Rajashri Das, Shankar Sarkar, Shilpa Bhattacharya, বংশীবদন সাহু, আশিস কুমার আদক, শুভেন্দু শেখর ভক্তা, দেবলীনা ব্যানার্জি দাস, অভিজিৎ বর্মন, and Topanda, Shubhenduda, and Kaji. In conclusion, I would like to express a special thanks to Dr. Raju Singh and Tuhin Singh for their support and cooperation. Thanks to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shukla, for the vote of thanks. Now I am inviting Dr. Nirmal Das to call it a day about our webinar.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Shivasish. So it is a nice day for us regarding the sharing of knowledge, and we have heard about new things regarding literature. So this type of webinar is very much useful and essential for the students also, and also the teachers like us, those who are not belongs to your line or your sector, that is literature, because we are in a separate faculty or separate branch. So we are very much thankful for sharing this type of knowledge with us. Thank you again. And thank you to Daya Dishanake, and also Dr. Shubhadeep Pal. Thank you, and thank you to all participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirmala sir. There is a declaration. Tomorrow we are going to meet again at 10:45, and
Okay.
tomorrow's program is for our Dr. Shruti Das, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of English, Berhampur University, and Dr. Joydeep Sarangi, Veteran Academic, Poet, Translator, Principal of New Alipur College, Kolkata. So waiting for tomorrow.